Okay, so well, good morning. I know we've said good morning here a few times as people are coming in here to the chat on this Friday morning, and I appreciate you during 3 days of AI training. It can be a lot. It can be a whole range of emotions and thoughts, and goodness, this is exciting, and then oh my goodness, what does this even mean for us? And it's a kind of the whole ball and wax all kind of mixed into one. I'll put back in here the learning doc again that we've been using the last couple days as people are coming in. You know, a couple quick little updates or housekeeping things before we get underway with our learning today. And I'm really, really excited for today. I know, we think about day one where a lot of us were just getting even acclimated to ChatGPT and AI and what it can and can't do, just at a kind of a base level, looking at ChatGPT. Yesterday, we kind of got into some of the bigger kind of meta topics of what it means for us, what it means for society, what it means for our kids. And Stefan was, he brings a perspective. And for some of us, we see it, we understand it. For some of us, it can really, really bring out some like frustrations, right? Like, what does this mean? I think it's really important as we go through this that there are lots of ideas, thoughts, opinions out there. And so that is designed, in some ways to get us thinking about, well, what is it that we're going to do? And today we're going to get into more practical things of how we go about trying to process next steps, because to sit and do nothing is not the answer to any of this work either. So I've been reflecting a lot on that and actually kind of redesigned a little bit of how I wanted to start this third session. And before we get into that, I do want to make just a couple little notes about the learning document. There was a great question from John earlier before some of you jumped on. This document is not going to go anywhere. Anything as questions and thoughts kind of come through, and I know we'll do some other learning today and other emails and stuff, I will keep coming back to this and adding things as needed, but I have no intention of it being deleted or going away. You're more than welcome to make your own copy and all that good stuff. A couple things that I have added. Yesterday and last night, I was able to get the recordings from session 1 and session 2 into the learning doc, and I'll do the same thing for session 3 here today. So if you go to these links here, what I've added is the link to the YouTube to go back and watch those videos. I've cleaned and spliced it, so all breakout rooms, all that kind of idle stuff is gone. Listening to myself yesterday, thank goodness I wasn't speaking all the time, because I think I quit counting after like 21,342 ums in the first 10 minutes. And I'm like, oh, they had to endure. I don't know what, either my coffee hadn't kicked in yet or what, but I apologize. But I learned the value of AI. I had an AI tool that could scrub that. So if you go back in these videos, you don't have to listen to me say after every word. So I apologize. However, in this document, I have time-stamped in the videos. And if you go into the YouTube video itself, if you go in the show notes, it will take you to it. So if there's a very specific thing you wanted in session 1 or session 2, you can click, it'll take you right there as you get going into the learning today. So those things are updated. I just want you to be aware of that, and kind of cleaned up a little bit of things today after this session. My slides, Kimberly's slides, who will be with us here today, and the recording will all be posted. So just so you have that as we get going. With that being said, I was trying to think, how do we kickstart this? How do we move things moving into a positive direction, thinking about what are we going to do with AI, what's it mean for us, as well as all the other things we're trying to navigate when it comes to education right now. I just wanted to come back to this, that a lot of these things that we're sharing, none of this is designed to say these ideas are right or the answer. They're there to provoke thought, to provoke dialogue, and to provoke some conversation about what are we going to do. This is not AI specific. A lot of times I don't like to share videos necessarily in online presentations, but my friend Jason Latimer, who is a world champion magician, this is an older video. And as I was thinking and reflecting on yesterday's session, thinking about our bridge to today, I really like this video. So I want to play it. It's just a couple minutes. He does some really cool magic. Outside of the magic, I want you to kind of think about the questions and the ideas that he's posing, because I think it does relate to some of the mindsets and the questions that we have ourselves around how do we continue to educate, empower our students and ourselves in this world of AI. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I checked all the boxes so it plays and we can hear the sound.
There's a show at Moxie that blends magic and science together.
Yeah, the couple of tricks we've seen so far have been amazing.
Yeah.
Cor Harlan joins us live this morning with a look at the man behind it all. Cor?
Boy, I've learned a card trick this morning, a little bit about physics, a little bit about some math stuff here from the world champion of magic, Jason Latimer, who's here at OMSI through March the 1st, and part of his degree repertoire also involves perceptual physics. Is that right?
This one's perceptual psychology. When I went out to compete at the World Championships, everyone said, I wanted to do the one trick that everyone said couldn't be done, the game of follow the ball under clear glass cups.
Follow the ball under clear glass cups. Not a problem.
All you have to do is follow the ball. And it looked like this. And that's when people started leaning forward. They started wondering how it could be possible. And it turns out we had been standing too close to the chalkboard. And even though this is supposed to be the oldest trick in the book, it turns out that if we wanted to make something vanish, we should use perceptual psychology, not physics. Right? It's a lot of fun when you think about it this way. But most people are just trying to figure it out. So I'll do one more move to see if I can prove a point.
If you're sitting at home this morning getting ready, come over to the TV for just a minute and check this out. This is really cool.
Well, think about it. If we actually use our answers to say what we can and can't happen, like we would never have discovered flight, and something even as simple as this would still be considered impossible. Would you like a head start? Here, I'll tell you. This one is going here.
All right, I'll keep my eye on it.
This one?
Keep your eye on it, Jay.
Okay. It'll look like this.
That is over the top. That is really cool. Over the top. And that's a world champion of magic here at OMSI all month long with a neat. How long is your show, by the way?
My show runs 50 minutes. It's the same as the IMAX movies. And so we ended up running the show Tuesday through Friday at 11 o'clock. And then we also have a show on 12 at 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. And so.
Look at that.
Yeah, and it turns out this was always possible. We just didn't know how to do it. And so that's why the right question changes everything. So the show is really about inspiring kids to want to ask the question that could make things possible.
Now, what the show partially, this is just something else. I could keep doing this because I could sit there like everybody else could sit here and just watch you do it all day. The show is intended actually to prompt kids as young as 6, 7, 8, 10 years old to ask some questions about physics, learn a little bit about math, generate some curiosity about all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and it will work for any age. It'll work for any age. Everyone's the magic tricks I designed over my lifetime were not meant for any age specifically. It just turns out, well, hold on, I got an idea. Under this one,
I'm getting a wrap here.
This one. No, we can do it better. It gets better. 3 solid blocks of glass.
Oh, wow. I mean, we could go on and on here.
So I wanted to start with that because I think the message there is pretty powerful, right? What are the what's the right question? What are the questions we should be asking? And yes, we have lots of answers, but maybe we need to look in other places. Where are those places? What are those questions? I don't know, but I think there's an element there as we kind of process this here. You know, what are our next steps collectively? What's this mean for you guys as an institution? What's it mean for us as parents? What's it mean for us as a community to our society? And not that we have to have it figured out, but that we keep that curiosity and drive going forward. And so another friend of mine, Kevin Honeycutt, you know, I do most of my work that I do in K-12 is around wonder and play and discovery and hands-on learning. And I think so much of that resonates to what it is we're trying to grapple with when it comes to this AI world. And if anything, it brings to light even more of that is needed than ever before. And we've been doing this idea of play. The play is the idea where ideas audition for a part of the brain's production of understanding. And we just have to keep tinkering and exploring and trying things out. And that's how we can start to find those questions we need to be asking. And I know that after the first 2 days, it can feel you get a little foggy in the brain and you start to question what it all means, you know? And so here, this is not a trick question. I am not a magician, so I'll just put that up front here in full disclosure. But I'm asking you here, you know, what is it that you see here? Hopefully, because I said it was a trick question, you see a 12, a 13, and a 14. You know, and if we shift our perspective a little bit and I ask you what you see now, hopefully you see ABC. And I think after these 2 days together, the question is like, which is it? Is it B or is it 13? And it's not so much that it's one or the other, but it can be and. And this is that space that I continue to find people in when I talk about AI, when I'm doing workshops, when I'm working with educators, this space of ambiguity where we're kind of dealing with two opposing thoughts. And how do we go forward with that? What does that mean? What's that look like? And just to kind of further illuminate this here is I'm going to show you 5 images here to kickstart. And this is just to get our brains gearing here a little bit to get ourselves ready for our guest here, Kimberly, that's about to join us and help us. I've got these 5 shapes. I'm going to give you about 15, 20 seconds, so you don't have to overthink it, but which of these shapes is different from the others? And so as you look at these, and keep your ideas to yourself, or you can throw your thoughts in the chat. If you're like, I know which one this is, go, by all means, go for it. Or if you're like, no, I don't want people to see my answer, that might not be right, that's fine too. Keep it to yourself. We'll give you about 5 more seconds to take a look at which of these 5 shapes, which one is different from the others. We've got a couple B answers here popping in. And as you think about what you think the answer might be, this is something that I think it's not just in education, but since we're in the education spaces, we love the right answer. We want to know, what is it? What is the answer? And these are some of the things we're trying to untrain our students to go after, things of that nature. And AI kind of makes it the same way. Sometimes we're like, just someone tell us what to do. What is the policy? What is the solution? And so for those of you that put in B and you chose figure B, you're right. It is the shape that only has all straight lines. So you might be feeling pretty good about that. But I could also say, those of you that chose C, and some of you are in there in the chat, you're also correct, because it was the only one that's asymmetrical. So you too are also technically correct. And if you picked A, I think we do have an A in there. There in the chat, you are also correct, because that's the only one that doesn't have a point. And I don't know if anyone chose B, or not B, excuse me, D. That one is also correct, because it's the only one that has a straight line and a curved line. And finally, if you did choose E, it's the only one with a non-Euclidean triangle. And so in other words, it's all about our point of view. So how do we collectively come together with our perspectives, our backgrounds, our thoughts around AI to figure out what is it we're going to do? And a lot of this comes back to this age-old question: does tradition impact our reality? And for some ways it should. And for some other ways, maybe we need to think a little different. So it's a lot about perception. How have we been doing things? And what are some things that maybe we have missed? I often joke when I do some work around learning space design. When I taught middle school, I used to park in the same parking spot every single day. And I would go to the same doors, and I get coffee in the same coffee spot, and I'd say hi to the same teachers, almost in stride in the same locations. And while all that's great, over time, you start to miss out on the other things happening that could be really profound in the opportunities around me. It's kind of like this picture. Some of you noticed a soccer ball, but you failed to realize this guy has 6 fingers. So where are the opportunities within your institution that maybe are sitting all around you that you could start to leverage? And you don't have to go outside of the institution. You have the people right there around you to go forth and make some of that work. And we know that kids are using AI. Some of you are using AI. Some people are not. People are going to carve their path. So how do we start to design for this experience and what this looks like moving forward, so that we can be on the same track? Are we bringing voices to the table? Are we having conversations with the students? Are we having conversations with each other? Maybe you are. I don't know all the ins and outs of what you have going on, but there are questions that maybe we should be asking about. And so it's this idea here that regardless of what your next steps are, to ensure that the work is connected. It's not just doing AI for the sake of AI, and it's not just ignoring AI because we like what we're doing. How do we start to connect that, right? How do we start to make sure that the work we're doing actually makes sense and is going through that? My friend Lonnie Berfquist, who's out in Denmark now, she used to be an educator at High Tech High. She recenters me a lot about what it means for the importance of education and what it means really just for human experience. A lot of times I will post on AI and she constantly reaches out and says, hey, just remember, The path forward in education it's not an AI, and we also don't need another methodology. It's getting back to this piece right here is why do we have school in the first place? And how do we move forward with some of that work? I wanted to share just real quick some things that are happening at the K-12 level, just so you have an awareness piece that maybe could be some thoughts or inspiration moving forward, not just AI specific, but just anytime there's change and emerging technology or just emerging things that happen within society. And this here is not to insult any of your intelligence, but we have, as you have as well, tons of mandates, tons of expectations, tons of standardized testing and curriculum and all these things. But at the bottom base, all that stuff, while yes, it can be stressful and a lot of things that we have to try to navigate, effective instructional practice is a key time and time again. And so how do we start to craft those questions that spark and sustain inquiry and opportunity for kids to communicate ideas and taking informed action and getting that kind of student-centered learning? The question that I've been challenging people with in the schools that I've been working with around AI and really just how do we get away from like rote memorization where engagement is not as high as we would like is how do we start to shift the mindset from not the age of AI from being the age of available answers, but to the age of articulate asking? How do we get kids asking questions and get them curious about that? And there's lots of ways to do that. I just bundle them all in a hyphenated teaching because everyone has a different flavor, whether it's project-based, problem-based, inquiry, design thinking, they're all great, but just getting the kids into that driver's seat of their learning. And it's this right here. How do we move from less of teaching our students to answer questions and more how to get them to question the answers, whether we're using AI or we're using other pieces of information that's coming through. So in the K-12 space, we are trying to weave in and we're trying to connect lots of different things and do less things of teaching in silos. And how do we merge these and get to this place of more applying and extending their thinking and their learning? And we do that through standards and depth of knowledge and our universal constructs. There was lots of great conversation yesterday around critical thinking. And we use a lot of Karen Hess matrices to get to these deeper levels of knowledge, this depth of knowledge levels 3 and 4. I'm not going to spend forever on this, but there was a great conversation that happened after the recording yesterday around skills. How do we actually teach critical thinking? How do we teach communication? What does this actually look like? We say these words. I'm not saying this is the answer, but I want to share that in some schools, we are diving into this into a great detail. And so we have these, and I've shared them in the learning doc. These are progressions of skills where we can dial in very specifically. This is one skill in critical thinking where we're looking at where are individual kids and how can we scaffold our instruction to teach these skills more explicitly. To say critical thinking can mean so many things. And so you can access this and dive into this in greater detail. We've got it for communication and collaboration, flexibility, creativity. And we're really now starting to design problems of practice around how do we strengthen these skills for kids, knowing that kids are all over and they don't have to have one mastered in order for to get to the next band while they're working on another skill. We're humans, we're all over the board, but these are the types of things that we're starting to look at. So it was a great conversation. I just want to at least highlight, at least make sure that you have access and awareness to where some schools are starting to get to. What are we going to do? We got to start to really dial in and get some of these skills built up. And a lot of this comes into like performance tasks. How do we get kids to, if AI is going to be using that to do their work and their writing and the things that we have fearful of, how do we engage in conversation? How do we have them defend their work orally? How do we do maybe some of these quote unquote kind of old school methods that we know work? Having debate and Socratic seminar and fishbowl, it's not always feasible in every single class and all the things that you guys are expected to do. But how do we bring more of that human connection into that learning experience? This here is a prompt that I use in K-12 when I'm getting asked to like work with kids on AI. And as much as AI continues to advance, it has yet to actually like do this properly. This is the prompt that I put in. It's an easy, quick visual way for kids to see that AI is not an authority and knows everything. And so you can see here in this picture, clearly it can't align animal sounds with animal pictures. So this is the image. It's a very kind of quick visual way. Not that every kid's gonna be like, oh yeah, I need to question, but it's a catalyst. It's a quick way to get kids to see, hey, AI is not perfect. If you just take it at face value, there are implications with that. So that's just some of the quick things that we go through. I want to get through. I want to take too much time because I want to get to Kimberly because she's got a lot of phenomenal things that I think are things that you're going to be interested in. Some of this is you're exploring and tinkering. I do have a section in the learning doc down kind of in the blue area for beyond the course of some tools that are like AI research assistant platforms. Again, none of these are perfect, but thinking about how do we design maybe some new workflows of learning for ourselves and others. And so this would just be like one example, or how do we start to stack some of these tools? So maybe I'm having students start, or maybe you are starting with Perplexity to hone in on a research question and see what develops. And then maybe I leverage Elicit again, and we start to use this AI research assistant to stack on top of Perplexity. And then I build that collection into Research Rabbit. And then from there, where does that take me? What does that look like? How do I start to verify and vet the information? And explicitly teaching kids how we can use some of these tools. Not that it's always accurate, not that it's always right, but it's the same kind of things we did when internet arrived and we had to teach kids how to search properly and do different things like that. So just some different thoughts as you get going. I don't know where that went, but I think this is important and something that I wanted to end at least my little morning spiel here with. Comes from a quote from Alan Kay, which came out of context. Actually, he was rather frustrated many decades ago about a situation that was occurring in his workplace. But his quote is, "The best way to predict the future is to invent it." And I believe that if we collectively work together and try to find solutions and try to try things, we can get to a place where we can find a way where teaching and learning can still exist at high levels, even as AI continues to shape and evolve and grow and expand and do this and do that. It's not all doom and gloom. And I just want to make sure that, we don't walk out of here thinking like there's no hope. There's plenty of hope. It's going to require some work. It's going to require some thinking and some reshifting and maybe some redesign, but it's definitely possible. And we've done this time and time again. I remember when my first year of teaching, I was trained on what is email, and that seemed so kind of funny at the time, but that was an earth-shattering concept to be trained on email and to learn how to take attendance digitally for the first time versus a piece of paper in a laminated sheet that would hang outside my door where people would tally that manually. We've been through these changes. AI is huge, but we've done it. So that's my little hot take here for this morning. And so things that I was thinking about after our session yesterday. I'm going to stop sharing here. And if there's any thoughts or questions, obviously feel free to throw those into the chat. But I want to introduce another person who I follow quite a bit online. I find her work and her colleagues' work incredibly valuable. A whole different angle and thoughts and kind of workflow than what we heard yesterday. And I think you guys are really, really going to resonate with a lot of the stuff that Kimberly Becker here has to share here today. The work Moxie's been doing, their podcast, their resources, there's so much what she's going to get into. And you can read her bio. I have it here in session C in our learning doc. You can learn more about her and the work that's going to go through. But I want to hand it over to her. I'll let her introduce herself, who she is, what she's got going on, and then she's got some stuff that she wants to share with you. As she's presenting, feel free to throw questions and stuff in the chat, and I'll try to curate those, and we'll definitely make room for some Q&A and some things that way. But I want to hand it over to Kimberly while we have the opportunity to maximize our time with her. So, Kimberly, thank you so much for your willingness to be with us today. For those that don't know, she's been working like crazy behind the scenes. I've been trying to keep her up to speed on day 1 and day 2, and she's been adjusting and pivoting and reading the thoughts and notes. And so it's not like, hey, here's a presentation. She's been doing all this out of the kindness of her heart because she believes in education. She believes there's possibilities. And so I know sometimes we don't always get to see that behind the scenes stuff, but she's just been absolutely incredible. And so thank you so much for your time, Kimberly, and the stage is all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Hey, everybody. I'm Kimberly Becker. I'm happy to be here today. And I tried to share my slides in the chat before, but I didn't see a way to do that. So, Aaron, if you could, I dropped it in LinkedIn for you if you want to share, and y'all can follow along. These are CCBY. This is a CCBY resource, which means you can freely share it and adapt it as long as you don't sell it. And I'm always happy to provide anything that we are working on at Moxie, which is my company, for people to use. It is all open source. So just a little bit about me. Although you have my bio, I just want to tell you that I guess my main identity, the way that I approach education and AI literacy in particular, is I am an applied linguist. So I've always been an educator. I started my career teaching high school right out of college. Quickly discovered that was not for me, moved on to the community college level. I was there for about 10 years. And then decided that I wanted to move forward with more education. Moved to Iowa, came to Iowa State, got a PhD in applied linguistics and technology. And so applied linguist is a very strange term. I guess a more approachable way to say it is basically I'm an educational linguist. And I have always worked in academia until really recently when I founded my own company with I co-founded it with a colleague named Jessica Parker. And Moxie is really a kind of an ecosystem for, it started out for academic writing, high-level research writing, academic writing. And then as AI started to infiltrate everything, we saw a need for AI literacy. And so I would say probably 90% of what we do at Moxie, which is a tech company, but is aligned with critical AI literacy and thinking really, really, and being really, really closely, I guess, critical of AI and what it's doing in the higher ed landscape. I'm also a doctoral writing consultant and a Gen AI consultant at a couple of universities as kind of part-time things. And I just had to drop a note since we are all Iowans. I believe we're all Iowans. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. To go Cyclones. All right, so that's me. You know that the learning objectives here are very critical ethical dimensions of generative AI. So if I abbreviate and say AI, what I mean is generative AI. So anything that can put out text or an image or a video, but it's creating, because there's a lot of AI out there and it's not all generative. But when I say AI, that's what I mean. And I'm going to present to you several different ethical frameworks that I think will give you some ways to think through this when you're looking at practical situations in your classroom, what to do on your syllabi, how to approach a task with students, questions to ask yourself and them. I'm just going to present some frameworks that are applicable in any discipline, any course, to get you thinking critically about the skills that are necessary for this world that's just covered up in Gen AI all of a sudden. And then I'll give you lots of resources along the way. And anytime you see a little link icon like this, it might be a different color, it might be slightly different because this slide set is kind of a amalgamation of lots of things I've done over the last couple of, really the last year, but couple of years. Please feel free to jot down your questions, raise your hand, and when I feel like I'm at a stopping spot, I'll check in with you. Okay, so, today we're getting into this topic that is causing quite a stir in academia and higher ed, generative AI. If you ask 10 faculty members about generative AI, you might get 30 different responses. And then if you ask them again in 20 minutes, you're going to have 50 new ones. So we're seeing a wide range of perspectives on this. And I think the first step, which is what your institution has clearly done, and I think we should acknowledge that, is bringing faculty into the conversation to engage in this discussion, because there is a palpable tension around this topic. And I want to acknowledge that, and I want to tell you that Your fear is validated. I feel fearful. I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but I have a lot of existential concerns about this, even though I am firmly embedded right in the middle of this technology and this industry. I do have a lot of concerns, and I have kids. One of them's at UNI. I have concerns that not one single one of his professors has mentioned AI to him. Okay, so he says. Now, I know enough from teaching, undergrads that may be his his perspective. They probably have said something and maybe he didn't hear it, but he didn't. He says he didn't hear it. So I have concerns not just from my perspective as a professional, but personally as well. So just to check in here, just for a quick minute, can you all give me like an emoji? So if you go down to the React button in your Zoom screen, in the menu of your Zoom screen, can you just choose an emoji that sort of gives your perspective? Like, how are you feeling about AI? And I'm going to stop sharing for a quick minute here and just. So if you click on emoji, then you have those 3 dots. You can actually choose many, many more choices. I just want to I need to read the room because I haven't been here. I have been keeping up, as Erin said, but I'd love to know, okay, so it's not overwhelmingly positive. If you have a positive view, please speak up. I just am curious, but yeah, this is good. Okay, great. Yeah, in the chat, or you can use the React button either way. Okay, this is really interesting. I like the wink, Emily. Nice. The death. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it causes all these emotions, right? And like emotions are hard for people. We were not the generation that got social emotional learning in K-12. We do not know how to handle this a lot of times, and it's tricky. So yeah, thanks for being honest. I think that's really important. And one of my takeaways today, I hope for you, really is just like, we're going to have to be vulnerable if we're going to talk to our students about this. So if you want to hear some other perspectives from community college faculty on generative AI, this is a link to a podcast I listened to a couple days ago from Moraine Valley Community College. They have a panel of faculty in this podcast that talk through their concerns, the good and the bad and the ugly. And so I think this would really make you, whatever you're feeling, this will validate that. And this will help you to sort of understand how other people are thinking about it. So that's just kind of a resource. But the way I see it is that we have kind of a triangulated crisis of literacies. And I know from my experience in community college work that this is certainly true at community college, but it's true at Iowa State. It's true at four-year colleges. And y'all, I'm from the South, so I'm going to use y'all. It's true in the doctoral writing community too. It's true of researchers. People have a varying set of literacies that they're coming to the table with. And so the way I see it is like this triangle of like, we have traditional literacy, which is like, reading and writing. When we say literacy, that's kind of what we generally think of. But then we have academic literacy, which is kind of knowing what it means to read and write in the academy, in the higher ed space for educational purposes. So for example, citing sources is an academic literacy. Vetting sources, understanding, how do we choose a good from a bad resource? And then we have digital literacy. And I really see AI literacy fitting within an expanded form of digital literacy. And the challenge is that people already don't know. I mean, I work with people in technology all the time. And even though they are at very high levels of education, they don't know what a browser is, for example. They don't know what the difference is between lots of things that we face every day. Like they don't know what cookies are. How many times do you click that little accept these cookies button? Do you know what a cookie is? I had to look it up the other day. I have no idea what a cookie is. So even though we may be educated and we may be very literate in one area, we may have low literacy in another area. So we've got these students coming to college and it's like a perfect storm. Interestingly, the very first publication I ever, and this is not a peer review, this is just like basically a blog that I published. It was when I was at the community college, my first year, a colleague came to me and she was like, I want to get published. Let's write an article. And we wrote an article called Getting Prepared for the Underprepared. It came out in 2001. I was an advisor at that time. And you know what? It's still true today. So that's kind of the perspective I'm coming from. And then this is our current landscape, right? These headlines illustrate the urgency. We've got this sensationalist kind of language, getting replaced, changing our roles, reshaping, transforming, how professors are polarized. It's, like I said, it's a spectrum. And then at the same time, we have all these wonderful theories coming out. This is one that I think you all talked about earlier this week from Sarah Eaton. It's the post-plagiarism framework, where she envisions kind of, what it might look like to write in the age of generative AI. And so there's lots of good stuff happening out there. And again, this is linked. Anytime you see that icon, this is a link. And realistically, if we don't have a seat at the table, I heard someone say the other day, if we don't have a seat at the table, we're going to be on the menu. To knowledgeably discuss AI and not have our voices overshadowed by voices of companies like this, these undetectable humanizer kind of tech tools that are marketing directly to students in very suboptimal ways. They pitch their products as, they literally are called humanizers. And so the idea is they make your AI generated text undetectable. It turns AI generated text into more human-like prose. I don't believe this for 1 second. I'm a linguist. I'm trained in natural language processing. I can tell you right now, it's just more generated text. And so, these companies are really targeting individuals. They say things like the product protects the vulnerable. That's how they market. They say it helps you avoid being wrongly accused. So this is what we're contending with in academia and higher ed in particular. We have to become some sort of champion of critically evaluating no matter what side you land on. And that's what I want to present you with today, is whether you side on being a champion of AI or whether you decide you're going to boycott AI, it really doesn't matter as long as you're being critical about it. And that is directly related to this idea of literacy. So here's a few of your questions and concerns that I just copied and dumped here on this slide. And I don't expect you to read this. Erin shared a document with me and I read through it. And so what I'm going to do is address each of these. It may not be in full, but I'm going to address each of these as I go through this presentation. And again, please do stop me, leave a note in the chat if you want to kind of drill down on something, because I'm going to move fast. I have a lot of slides and I may skip some because you have the slides. You can always reach out to me. You can ask about it if you have a question, but that's kind of my plan here. And so the first question that I saw, this was from the Librarians, was how can the librarians support faculty in learning about AI? Should we conduct AI literacy sessions? And my answer to that is unequivocally yes. And I'm going to give you lots of resources today. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll give you my email address. I'm happy to be a resource for you. This is the only way. We have to decide if we're going to be an adopter or a resistor, right? Or somewhere in the middle. And the only way we can do that is if we start to be critical. So that's where I'm coming from. And this is a framework. And this framework is something that I came up with my colleague, Jessica Parker. We're the co-founders of Moxie, and we consider AI literacy to be an extension of digital literacy. So to help us think through the kind of skills we need in this world, we have expanded and adapted a framework that was published in 2004 by someone named Stuart Selber. And he called it the Multiliteracies for a Digital Age. Now that was 20 years ago. So we're updating this framework and it has 3 layers. The layers are embedded in each other. So the first layer is the kind of coral color, and this is functional AI literacy. So I like to describe this as this is the under the hood understanding. You don't have to be a machine learning engineer, but just how to operate and interact with these digital technologies, how to acquire the basic skills you need to proficiently perform in a digital environment and decide what it does and what it doesn't do. And so I've listed a few things there. And then we have critical literacy. So once we have a functional understanding, we can expand that to a critical understanding, but we can't do it without starting at functional. And this is true for you and for your students. It's true for everybody. When we start with functional and we understand under the hood, then we can be critical. Then we have the knowledge we need to talk about it and evaluate it. So critical AI literacy is when we assess quality, relevance, bias, ethical considerations. How are we thinking about this generation, this AI generation? What are we going to do with these outputs? And then the final one, and this is the biggest blue circle, was originally called, in Selber's framework, it was called rhetorical literacy. I've been teaching this framework for about a year now, and what I've found is that everybody's scared of the word rhetoric. Who knew? And I'll revisit this more a little bit later, but the word rhetoric really scares people, and they opt out. They think rhetoric doesn't apply to me. That's about writing. It's not about me. And so I even had a conversation with a marketing professor who said, oh no, I don't need to talk about rhetorical literacy because I'm in marketing. I'm not in writing. I'm not in the English department. And I said, well, respectfully, sir, rhetoric is about persuasion. And if marketing is anything, it's persuasive, or it's intending to be. So I've changed the name from rhetorical to academic, because what I really mean is communicating in an academic context, understanding who's the author, who's the audience, what's my purpose, understanding style, tone, voice, comparing and contrasting human and AI generated content, and sort of getting into those ethical applications for academic tasks. So Selber argues, and I do too, that these have to be interconnected, that we can only be empowered by this literacy if we develop it kind of incrementally in a sustainable way over time. Obviously, you're not going to get this in a 3-day workshop before you start the semester. I mean, if I were you, I probably would be kind of half listening to this and working on my syllabus and my first day assignments. I don't know, but I'm just looking at some of you and wondering, and just keeping it real. I got a lot of my ideas from an article by a group of researchers who created some metaphors for AI literacy. This is a really fun task you can do with students to talk through these 3 types of literacy. They give some examples of metaphors, and you can ask your students to come up with some other ones for what does it mean to understand AI through these certain lenses. So for example, in terms of functional AI literacy, we can think of it as like a helper, an assistant, a calculator for words, an autocomplete, a tool, etc. In critical AI literacy, my favorite is the mansplainer, but one of the authors of this is Egyptian, and her word is Fahlawi, which means bullshitter, essentially. There's, of course, stochastic parrot, blurry JPEG, colonizing loudspeaker, and this is a great opportunity for you to, drill down on these words. These aren't words we use every day, right? Well, maybe mansplainer is, but I certainly don't use stochastic every day or colonizing. But these are great words to engage with your students and get them thinking about it and to think about it yourself. And then rhetorical or academic literacy, we can think about it as like a double-edged sword. Maybe it's leveling the playing field, or maybe it's covering up some skills that haven't yet developed. And I think that's the main concern, right? Is that it could be like a synthetic way, if a student is using AI, to kind of thwart an assessment and get around it and cheat, obviously. And that's where the fear comes from. So this again, I'm just kind of throwing some resources at you. If you want more resources, of course, Erin and Stefan have loaded you down with functional literacy tips and probably some critical ones too. I will add to that Moxie has a YouTube channel that's a great source of AI literacy. We have short form, long form videos, webinars. We have TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We have all kinds of social media. Just trying to connect with people in whatever way we can. Today, though, obviously we're talking here about critical and academic or rhetorical literacy. Another comment that I wanted to respond to, well, let me just check in, because I know I'm moving fast. Erin, is there anything I need to address? I can't see for some reason when I'm sharing. I've lost the
No,
chat.
you're good. No, I know a lot of people are eager to click on those links, and I looked at my LinkedIn. I don't have access to the slides. So I just know people are really excited about clicking on the link. So
if I stop sharing, can I, I don't have a way to, I don't see an option to upload slides. So
we can just link it in afterwards. I'll just make sure, but I know people are.
yeah. Did you get it in your LinkedIn?
I did not. No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
So we'll get that covered.
Oh,
But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my slides are made with Canva. I'm a big proponent of visual rhetoric and sharing that with students. And I always try to teach that and try to really help them understand what it means to not make a power paragraph, but to make a PowerPoint. I'm big on that. I think my students really despise me for that. But yeah, so another comment that I wanted to respond to from the document that I saw was students using AI for learning, not for cheating. And I assume this means faculty, although I assume a student could have written this too, need to change our mindset drastically. And that's overwhelming. Yes. And I think that there are things that can be done, even if they're sort of nebulous and we don't really like any of our choices. I think that's a really hard fact of like, adulting is that we have choices. We just don't always like them. And so I understand that overwhelming feeling. And I feel it too. Like I said, it is a challenge to traditional education. It is a challenge to traditional approaches. We already had cell phones going on, and now we have this. But I think we can reframe it as an opportunity rather than a threat. And so I'm just you just bear with me here as I do a little kind of this is a little bit tongue in cheek. A few stories about people who, when they were faced with really difficult circumstances, came up with some really good ideas, invention, solution. And I got a lot of help from my buddy Claude, my favorite chatbot right now from Anthropic. But don't worry, I fact checked it. So I can assure you that these are real things, but most of them I didn't know about. And the first one is, I did not know how penicillin was discovered. I did not know that Alexander Fleming was trying to grow bacteria and study it in his petri dish. And he looked down one day and noticed there was mold in there. All of a sudden, he was like, oh no, it's contaminated. But then he realized that mold was preventing the bacteria from growing. It was inhibiting its growth. And so, of course, this is like an accidental observation that led to the development of antibiotics. And so if you're feeling like AI is a contamination in our academic environment, then take heart. As I said, this is a little tongue in cheek. Is AI putting you in a blue period like Picasso? It's January, it's cold. These kids these days with their chatbots and their phones, Picasso's blue period was also born from struggles, and yet it produced some of his most impactful work, including this man with a guitar. And I'm sure that the cold Iowa January combined with all this AI overwhelm makes you want to get away. Another story of overcoming really difficult circumstances is Southwest's journey to success. They spent their first 2 years in legal battles that went all the way to the Supreme Court. I was a big Southwest fan back in the day when I lived in Nashville. And finally, if you do decide to get away, you may want to stay in an Airbnb, which was also developed from a struggle of two designers who were broke in 2008 when the economy tanked, and they turned their living room into a bed and breakfast. And then not long after, Airbnb was born. And so I see us here. We are here with all these, all kidding aside, we are here in this moment. And it's not just us, it's our students. Our students are here with us. They are in this world where AI is reshaping everything, not just education, the workforce. And they're caught in the middle of some faculty who fear it, some faculty who hate it. And I'm going to tell you some of what those faculty are saying and doing on LinkedIn. I'll tell you who to follow if this is how you want to approach it. Many of them are already using AI. Many of you are already using AI. Some of you are avoiding it. I've met a lot of students who are avoiding it. They are scared to death, especially at the graduate level. They are terrified they're going to get kicked out of their program. So, for me, I guess I feel we have to start fostering some AI literacy because we have to have some sort of contribution to this conversation. It can be incremental, but our students really need us to help them navigate this world. They don't know what to do about it. They are all over the place too. Maybe you think most of them are using it, and maybe they are. I don't know. I can't speak for your students, but I just know it seems like perspectives are all over the board. It hasn't really leveled out yet. And don't just take it from me. This is nothing new. Of course, we know that often the best learning takes place when there's a struggle. And so if we're going to preach that to our students, which I do, I don't know about you, but I often say it's not, if you knew it all, you wouldn't be here. Like, you have to have that positive struggle, that productive struggle, so that whatever is standing in your way can just sort of become the way. And that's like really easier said than done, obviously, but this is not new. So, couple universal truths. AI abstinence is not a strategy. Avoiding it really isn't sustainable. I think it's only a matter of time before it's embedded into Microsoft Word, Google Docs. It's already embedded into Google. I think it's going to be embedded into Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, all of our systems that we're using is just going to become really, really entrenched. And so as we are unable to separate technologies into their various streams, I think it's really important that we, again, talk critically about it, consider its role in both formal and informal settings. The second thing is there's a 2-bucket challenge. It's leaky because it's a continual process. So we're filling our bucket with AI literacy and it's sort of leaking out because we have a lot of other stuff going on. Remember that triangle I talked about? Everybody's dealing with a lot on the brain: content knowledge, strategic skills, technological literacy, etc., discipline-specific ideas, grading. Oh my goodness, grading. And so we have to kind of constantly fill our bucket. And the way I do that is social media. It's easy and it's fun, and I don't have to, read anything serious. It can be educational without being too serious. And I love what Erin said in the beginning about play. I often encourage people to play with technology, and I say, you're not going to break it. Really, you're not. I mean, you might break your hardware, but you're very unlikely to break software. And the last kind of universal truth is like, find an aha moment and share it with somebody and get some value out of collaborating so that you're thinking about effectiveness and not just efficiency. I think one of the problems is that marketing is really fixated on productivity, speed, superhuman power. There are some things that need to be a struggle. They don't need to be fast and furious or quick and dirty. There are some things where we need to focus on effectiveness, not efficiency. So find those opportunities, find both. Share them with your students, share them with your colleagues, and then listen to other people and just find one thing that you want to integrate. Okay. So critical AI literacy urges us to think about broader cultural, social, ethical implications. And for academia, for higher ed, this involves really scrutinizing how AI influences research integrity, for example, whether that is a freshman comp class where they're just learning to integrate citations, or a doctoral candidate where they're writing a dissertation, or published scientific research. There's also privacy concerns, accessibility concerns. Recognizing biases in AI systems is crucial because their training data is human. And so the human is where the bias starts. And then the AI is just reflecting back to us kind of some of our worst perspectives because it's been scraped from the web. And so I'm sure that Stefan and Erin have told you about this, but it's really important that I think, we talk about this, we start to develop some policies or just move in that general direction. Here are some questions you can ask yourself to sort of get to this idea of evaluating sources, evaluating logic, factual accuracy, reliability, that kind of thing. And so, we'll sort of revisit these here in the next few slides. Here's a great article that really points to how biased large language models are. So large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. These researchers asked the question, do LLMs produce content that is biased towards certain groups of people? And they measured it by counting the number of words referring to a given group of people, like women or African Americans. And so here is this comes directly from their article. It's just a screenshot. And actually you read this from right to left. So it's a little bit backwards. But if you start over here, what they did is they took 8,000 articles from the New York Times and Reuters, and they took just the headlines, and they fed those headlines into a prompt and told an AI to write an article about that headline. So exactly this headline, fed it in, output an article, totally generated fake article. And then from that AI generated content, they counted words, sentences, and document level occurrences of gender and racial bias. What do you think the answer was? Are LLMs biased? Absolutely 100% yes. They were very biased. So no surprise, but it is an empirical fact. And if you want to refer to this, I encourage you to share this with your students. Read it for yourself. It's a really interesting report, and it gives you a lot of good examples. And so, the next question then is like, okay, but why? Why are they biased? And I think we can all cultivate some abilities to analyze, critique, and then shape the narrative around AI. As academics, we're often trendsetters for understanding societal impacts. And so I think we can be leaders in this as long as we understand it. We also have influential voices as academics. We're typically respected in the community, and so we can shape some of these conversations and the trajectory of the conversation if we critically engage. So here's a couple things to think about. And students really respond well to this because they like to talk about weird stuff. Okay, everybody likes to talk about weird stuff. There's two kinds of weird that come up in large language model outputs, right? The first kind of weird is related to the complexity of a neural network. And I'm not going to get into this because that's functional AI literacy. And what we're talking about here is critical AI literacy. But it is almost impossible to understand and know why LLMs make the connections that they do. It is, even for the engineers, the machine learning engineers, it's very difficult for them to understand. Leon Furs is a great person to follow, very critical of AI. He's an Australian researcher and educator. I love his stuff. He's got an assessment framework that I think is probably at the top of the list in terms of what people are accepting in the world of understanding how we're going to evaluate AI. So weird can just mean literally weird, and we don't know how to explain it. That's what weird means. But it's also a different kind of weird. The representation in these language models is weird in the sense of the acronym Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic. Okay, and so if you're not familiar with this acronym, I wasn't either. I just follow some people, and I'll show you besides Leon Furs, I'm going to give you some names along the name drop throughout this. But there was a study published back in 2010 looking at psychology research and examining the participants, which all at that time came from weird societies. So Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And the implications were that basically these samples cannot be generalized, obviously, to non-weird populations, and thus they are biased. So, wow, this is amazing fodder for any number of courses I could imagine. Humanities, social sciences, psychology, sociology. This is a wonderful way to approach critical evaluation of the output. And it's the second form of weird. So we got regular weird, and then we have acronym weird. Yeah. I learned so much of this from Maha Bali, who is an Egyptian researcher I discovered from social media. I particularly love her two blog posts, What I Mean When I Say Critical AI Literacy. She's a teaching professor. She is very, very applied, not a whole lot of theory, very, very practical. And she's teaching in a non-weird society. So she's very critical of these outputs. And I think if you're on the kind of spectrum of it where you're concerned, I think her writing will really resonate with you. She also has a wonderful blog called Where Are the Crescents in AI, where she talks about doing an image generation task with her students. And she asked them to generate images of hospitals. So when they generated images of hospitals, it was crosses, like the Christian cross on every hospital. And her students were like, what is this? This isn't a hospital. Because in their context, in Egypt, they wouldn't have a cross on a hospital. And so her question, where are the crescents? Crescent is the symbol for Islam. And so she's saying, you know, this is a real problem for her students. And she speaks as a professor to give voice to what her students experience when they use AI, which is that they don't see themselves reflected in that. And she's really concerned about that. Of course, biased information is not new. In 2021, this is a really popular research article. It got Timnit Gebru fired. Excuse me. Emily Bender is a linguist I follow a lot. She's very critical and has been for many, many years. They talk about bias amplification, ungrounded answers, lack of transparency, environmental issues, impacts on information ecosystems. So again, topics in business, economics, poli-sci, ecology, environmental science, and so on. And speaking of, I don't know what happened. Okay. Can you still see my slides? Yeah, you can. Speaking of environmental issues, sorry, I'm just trying to get my screen readable here, and other existential threats, there's a researcher called John Ippolito. He has some wonderful resources on how we're all doomed. So if you really want to read more about this, he has an impact risk acronym where he talks through kind of these issues, one of which is climate impact. And then if you want to drill down specifically into climate impact, he has a great source of, it's not showing here, but in my slides he really drills down and he went through lots and lots of research about environmental impacts and he translates it for you in terms of water use and energy consumption. And so he links to research and he makes it easily understandable so that you could just repurpose this directly for your students if it's something that you wanted to talk about or read about, learn about. The two things that practically speaking I focus on when I teach this is just two things. One is token usage, which is going to bring up the question of what is a token and why do we have tokens, and image generation. So I'll just briefly say tokens matter because they are the kind of the currency of AI. And so if you can't really talk in AI terms about words or sentences because the AI reads characters. And so one of the things that the language model is doing on the back end is it's tokenizing. And if you come to Iowa State and you want to get a degree in linguistics, they'll teach you how to tokenize manually, or you can do it with OpenAI has a tokenizer playground that's really fun. But basically, tokens are pieces of words. And so they're digital currency and you're purchasing, that's what you're purchasing. When you get a ChatGPT subscription or a Claude subscription or a subscription to Moxie, my platform, you're purchasing tokens because we have to pay those companies for those tokens. And each action, whether you're inputting or whether that model is outputting, is coming to you in the form of tokens. And then that's kind of what you're paying for. I'm not suggesting that you do a real deep dive into this. I just think it's important that students know language models aren't good at counting words. So for example, if they're trying to output their essay and it needs to be, 1,000 words, that's not going to work because the AI can only count tokens. It can't count words. It can't count sentences, can't count pages. It can only count tokens. So if you teach grammar, syntax, I don't know, I do, then this is a great way to really drill down into that kind of mechanical nature of language. And here's some examples here. I got these from OpenAI. Wayne Gretzky's quote, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." That's 11 tokens. The transcript of the U.S. Declaration of Independence is about 1,600 tokens. This source allows you to play, again, coming back to this idea of playing to develop a sense of wonder and how this all works. OpenAI has like a little playground and you can see what a token is and how it works. So I tell people generating with tokens using big documents. So like in my use case where I'm working with graduate students, they're uploading long documents, long articles, 30-page research reports, in some cases, hundreds of pages of their dissertation to get some feedback or to interact with the AI in a certain way with those long documents. That uses a lot of tokens. It uses a lot of energy. But images, use way more energy. So generating one image takes, I've heard two different things. I've heard it takes as much energy as it does to charge a smartphone. I've also heard that it takes as much energy as half a smartphone charge. I'm not really sure which is right. I think John Ippolito probably dives into this a little deeper. But just to give you some other context, 1,000 images is like driving about 4 miles, but 1,000 text prompts is like driving whatever that incremental fraction is. I don't know. So text is definitely better than images. So when I give practical advice to people, I say, start new threads a lot. Because what happens, when you start a new thread, that's like a new chat window opens up. Yeah. And so you can save that chat. Every time you have a new idea or you've changed subjects, or if you've just been working in a chat window for a while, start a new thread, because the way the AI works is it goes to the top and it reads down through everything every single time you prompt it, because it's jogging its memory, right? So if you are 6 threads down, it's still going to, as soon as you hit enter, go back to the very top of the conversation and read all the way down. So if you want to save tokens, save energy, conserve, start new threads, don't upload huge 300-page books as PDFs. That wastes a lot of tokens, and that's way too much context for an AI. If you really want to get a good answer, you need to just copy paste a small section. If you want to interact with a piece of text, just use copy paste. And reduce image generation. If you're concerned about environment, image generation is a real problem. As I showed you on the previous slide. So I'm just going to take a breath here, check in, get a sip of water. Is there anything?
I don't, but maybe we can do a quick check. If there's anyone so far have a question or thought, either you want to throw it into the chat, or if you want to come off mute and pose a question for Kimberly here. She's gone through some of this beginning stuff here.
I see a question about AI collecting so much data. What security concerns do we have while using it? And what defenses do we have as an institution? Yeah, so every model, every platform, every interface has a way that you can toggle off the collection of your data. And so what's tricky, though, is that I'm just going to sit down here. What's tricky is that it used to be like ChatGPT used to word this. I think the wording was something like, turn off data collection and training or something. And now the way that OpenAI words that toggle, and if you go into settings, if you have a ChatGPT account and you go into settings, you can toggle it off, but the wording is tricky. It says, make the model better for everyone. So if you toggle it off, you're not contributing to the training of the model, but you also can't save your chats. So if you're a person that goes back to a chat and wants to look at what you did, it's a double-edged sword. So yeah, I mean, that simple toggle, it's not a complicated technical feature. It's just a toggle. I think just knowing that, I was talking to an IRB, an Institutional Research Board, the other day, because they're concerned, with people researching and using generative AI. I said, this is an easy answer. You just need to know about this little toggle. It's just that the wording, I want to know what psychologists came up with that wording, because that's really tricky. When I saw that, I was like, wow, this is next level. Yes. And so kind of one of the next comments says some of the platforms have an educational license that's separate from training. Yeah. Like Moxie, so the platform that I created, it's an application layer. So it puts kind of guardrails between the user and the large language model. Our chats are completely private. The user can save them, but they don't train the models. We can't see them. The AI companies can't see them. So yeah, usually if you have like an ed tech tool, you don't have to worry about that so much, but you need to know the right questions to ask. Yeah, AI in nursing education. Yeah, the very first publication I did in about using AI kind of in the writing world was about I took a corpus of A-graded nursing papers, graduate student nursing papers, and I asked an AI, I think it was ChatGPT 3 at that time, so it was, an older model, to grade them and give some feedback, knowing that humans had already given them an A grade. And what we found was that it was much more critical. It didn't give them A's, it gave most of them B's. This was really early research that we were doing when we were exploring, like, how can we use the AI beyond just generating text? How can we use it for like evaluating text that's already written by a human? So yeah, I think there's a lot of healthcare stuff going on. When starting new threads, does AI still remember what it has learned about you, specifically ChatGPT? When I'm using it to help generate, I work hard to give a specific, clear prompt. When I start a new thread, I'm starting over like blank slate. No, not necessarily. So if you go into your settings in ChatGPT, you can tell the model who you are, what you normally like, what your context is, what your perspective is, and why you're using it. Now you have to be pretty general because it's gonna use this every single time it responds to you, and it can refer to that. That happens in the settings. But in terms of the thread itself, it only can remember what's within one thread, and as it goes and gets more and more and more context, it's just like similar to a human. As I get more and more stuff in my life, I start to forget more and more things because I just can't hold all that in my neural networks, and neither can a machine.
I've seen this online too a little bit. If you've been using ChatGPT for a while, or if you're relatively new, it may not give you a whole lot, but the idea is that these platforms continue this idea of figuring out memory, so to speak. You can prompt it to say, hey, create an image. I know that uses a lot of energy, and give me a bio, what you know about me so far. It's kind of wild what it will put together. So I've been using ChatGPT. I use it a lot, and it was pretty spot on. And it's like, okay. So it, it's an interesting piece because they don't forget anything. So it's an important, kind of interesting little prompt if you've been using it for a while, just to kind of see what it thinks of you, and it may give you a whole range of feelings.
Dan is asking, are there instances of teachers at any level who openly use AI for evaluating student work, and is that a direction we're eventually heading toward? I think so, because I think there's a perfect storm of overwhelm in faculty at all levels. And just like students, when they get stressed, they're going to use it to cheat because they're stressed. That's when people cheat and cut corners, is when they are pressured and stressed. Teachers are very pressured and stressed. And so I think, yes. From my personal experience, I can tell you that I would never use it to do any sort of quantitative grading, but evaluating student work in terms of qualitative feedback, given parameters like a rubric, absolutely. In fact, that is what Moxie does. Our tech platform is basically like a peer review simulation for researchers. Any of you who have written a thesis or a dissertation know that it's often very hard to get timely feedback from a professor. Many professors don't know how to give good writing feedback. They may focus just on APA formatting or just on grammar when you're writing this big thing and really the content matters more than the mechanics. But yeah, this is what we do at Moxie, and we do make some bespoke tools, and I made a automated rubric essentially for a professor who teaches a research writing class and is grading really long documents. And so she actually doesn't use numerical grades. She just gives qualitative feedback. And I automated her rubric for her. So she uses it, she validates it, she can use it to give, a more feedback than she could possibly write. And so she's augmenting her expertise, but it's her rubric and she can iterate, she can talk with it back and forth. If it's being too critical, she can say, lighten up. If it's being too easy on them, she can say, drill down. So she has that ability. So yes, I think this is the direction that we are eventually heading toward, for good or for bad. But again, don't use it for quantitative. Absolutely don't use it for actual grading. I think it can give you feedback, yes, but not grading. All right.
In the K-12 space too, where I've been doing some work, I don't know that I've seen too many that are willing to be open yet. I've had lots of conversations where educators have used it in all sorts of instances, good and bad. Just that we kind of talked about this yesterday in our session, the idea of being transparent right now is kind of an interesting space. I think as people are still trying to grapple with AI in general, but that transparency piece is huge. And even try to teach kids how to use AI for some types of feedback is important. Like what are those skills like of how to help them work through, like, what are the counter arguments to my idea? Where are the pieces that maybe are coming across unclear, and not just doing all the work for them, but how to leverage that as kind of a thought partner when they may not have that at home.
Yeah. Erin, how am I doing on time?
Good. We probably go. I want to make sure they get a chance to kind of debrief in their breakout room. So probably, we can go like another 10, 15-ish minutes, probably. I don't know what else you have left in your slides, but I want to make sure they get time to kind of process what you've shared and then bring them back full circle before they move on to their next set of meetings.
Well, I will at least try to get through some of the comments that I want to respond to that I know you all had concerns or questions about. And so I'm going to transition now and talk a little bit about academic AI literacy. And so as I said, I used to call this rhetorical literacy, where we're looking at kind of the issues related to writing specifically. And of course, we write in lots of classes. I'm not just talking about writing classes, but this is definitely relevant to those of you who teach composition. But if we think about introducing AI into the rhetorical situation where we have like author, audience, purpose, for example, the purposes, the subjects, the audiences for academic writing have mostly not changed, but the idea of a writer has. And so this shift in the rhetorical situation is very, very interesting to me. And I would say this is kind of where most of my main research is these days, is looking at where we get our sources, how we position ourselves as writers with those sources in a world where AI is embedded. And usually the way I approach this, and I think I forgot a link on this slide, but this comes from a rhetorician who says, it's not just human or not. There's a spectrum of considerations that happen. You can have completely synthetic writing where it's fully generated. You can have human in the loop writing, which is like maybe human starts, AI gives feedback, human revises. You can have machine in the loop writing, which is like machine starts it, human revises, machine gives feedback, etc. So there, don't think about it as a binary thing. It can be a spectrum, just almost like everything. And let's see, this is the question that was asked: using or monitoring AI, plagiarism, how to cite ChatGPT. So a scholar at Iowa State named Kristen Terrell wrote a couple of blog posts for us. The first one is called, "Could I cite the AI tool that I used?" And the second one is called How to Cite the AI Tool. So after you decide if you should, then she shows you how to do that. And so I highly recommend that. Also coming from Kristen and one of my colleagues at Iowa State, Elena Kotos, they have a really, I think, clear framework for guiding faculty decisions on AI use in education that has to do with 3 E's: the effectiveness, efficiency, and ethical nature of those tools. And so here, and again, I'm sharing all of this with you, so I'm not going to drill down just to save time. I think this will give you some things to think about in terms of, maybe you need to be able to say that it's always ethical. If I'm going to use it, that's my hard boundary, is that it will have to always be ethical. It's not enough for it just to be efficient or effective. Maybe it needs to be all three. Maybe it needs to be 2 out of the 3. I don't know. Every context is different, but this can give you some ways to think about it. I think it's also really important to look for multiple types of bias. And so again, there are some that are more subtle than others. Obviously, when we think of bias, we think of, kind of the social bias intricacies, but there are many, many other types of bias. So there, AI models are trained on data up to a certain point. So there can be time-related bias, of course, linguistic bias, majority culture, gender, and contextual insensitivity. All of those are easier to spot. We kind of know to look for those. But then there's some that are much harder to spot. I'll give you a couple of easy examples of this in just a minute, but I have a lot of YouTube videos on this. We write about this on our Substack, which is a platform. It's like a blog platform. And we have a podcast. We talk about this on our podcast. We make YouTube videos about this. We are talking about these harder to spot biases all the time. And so let me see. So this is just, if you want to read about the easier to spot ones, here's an article. If you want to learn about algorithmic bias, and this is some of you brought this up, you said similar to music playlists that show you songs like you already like these songs. How do you see other perspectives? How do you learn new things if you're only in your bias bubble? Seth Lazar is an academic that has a lot of good work on this. It's all publicly available. I highly recommend that you check him out. There's a link here for one of his lectures on governing algorithmic issues related to AI, but he's got a lot of good stuff. And I think it's going to help you think about it. It could also help your students. It's very dense. This is not something you're going to hand to a freshman. I struggled. Okay. I talk a lot about source bias and quantification bias. And let me just give you, and simplification bias. And let me just give you an example of that is very related to like causal language and science. And this really highlights the causal fallacy that we often teach in rhetoric classes. So if you had an original sentence, then let's say it had the word amid in it. It's talking about inflation. And it says this inflation happened amid high levels, or this grocery inflation happened amid high levels of other types of inflation. That means at the same time, right? So that would be like correlation, temporal, yeah? If you ask an AI to summarize or paraphrase that, it's going to use a different set of linguistic resources, words, phrases, etc. And if it changes that amid to this is due to, that is now a level up in the evidence hierarchy. And it can be a fallacy, right? A causal fallacy. Correlation is not causation. Maybe this does not matter in your discipline, but I do not want my doctor making a correlation versus causation mistake. And if AI research tools are paraphrasing research, like some of the things that Aaron was telling you about, Elicit, Research Rabbit, Litmaps, Cite, there's a lot of them on the market now. Be very careful with causal language, because this can be simplified and it can really skew what is important wording. I say a lot about this. This is the hill I'm going to die on. And humans, it can happen in humans too. There's a great story about how one way the opioid crisis got started was a misinterpretation of research, a leveling up of evidence that was really, really basic. It was just a letter to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine that got picked up by pharmaceutical companies and passed out, as we all know. And so I have a YouTube video on it. I have lots of writing on this. This is the hill I'm going to die on. I'm calling it knowledge drift. I'm very, very concerned about what this means for scientific publication. Okay, other stuff there's not going to probably be time for. Let me just hit the ones that you asked about. Why bother even having writing classes? Yeah, I know. I know, right? My entire career has been mostly teaching academic writing. Some considerations that I have as a linguist, I think we have to learn what it means to upskill our feedback so that we can recognize and describe telltale signs of writing that lack depth and flow. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. And you can watch YouTube videos of me talking about depth, flow, and accuracy. When people think about writing, they often think about this: precise mechanics, spelling, grammar, punctuation, citation formatting. Don't worry. I tell people, don't worry about that. That is now fully automatable. We have Grammarly helping us with that. There's a company called Recite that can formulate an MLA or APA or Chicago style bibliography just like that. So accuracy level issues are very, very automatable. They're easy to automate. Flow is the connection of our ideas, somewhat easy to automate. Depth is the human aspect of writing that is really difficult to automate. So this is like the variety and the range of your language, your ideas, your sources, the depth of your analysis. And this is how I teach writing now. This comes from second language learning. It's a theory that applies to second language learners, but I think academic writing is a second language, or at least a second dialect to everybody. So I approach it in this way. And this really helps people to know where to start and what to look for. And we did a webinar on this. We called it How to Assess Writing Without an AI Detector. It shows you what to look for. And so that is linked there. Let me skip over. Here's a question. In the future, will accrediting bodies make CTE programs more performance-based? I think this is a question about assessment because it's about tests and quizzes. I think so. Yeah. Just yesterday, I posted on LinkedIn about this this is what I posted on LinkedIn about assessment and what assessment means and what I think that looks like in the world of generative AI. So I won't say more about that. You can find that online. I think that's just an extra slide that it got in there. Benefits: increasing timeliness of work, can assist in problem solving, sparking creativeness like an electronic book. Yes. Okay. And then I have a whole section of slides on ways that higher ed faculty can start to use AI, including prompts, and specifically prompts for specific tools, like prompts associated with perplexity, what to watch out for, prompts associated with content generation, and so on. Again, I'm going to blow through these. Claude's my favorite, but I call it Claudia because it's too helpful to be a man. Sorry. I just want to do a brief shout out about Moxie before I finalize this, because I want you to know that not every generative AI is for the sole purpose of generating writing for a human. There are some application layers like Moxie that sit firmly between a student or a user and a large language model. And so basically, Moxie's tools help users with academic specific writing like literature reviews, getting unstuck, writing up methods, results, discussions, and they have guardrails. So if you ask a Moxie tool to write for you, it will refuse, period. This is our, again, hills we want to die on. This is one of them. An AI language model should not write for a student in the context of academic integrity. It thwarts assessment and it is cheating from my perspective. Now, I think we can get creative, but I don't know if students are willing to do that. But Moxie will not write for the user. It will coach them through the writing. And we market to grad students and researchers. So this is a different population than you work with. You work with undergrads. Yes, I think something like this could be developed for undergrads. I don't know that it has been yet. I don't know of one, but I just want you to know that Gen AI is not the be all end all, is not ChatGPT. There are lots of different ones out there. There's creating presentations with AI, videos, Notebook LM, talk to your notes, turn written notes into a podcast. I have a child in high school with dyslexia. He has a lot of trouble reading. It was finals time recently, and we turned all of his notes from his world history class into a podcast. What's so interesting about Notebook LM is that you can pause the podcast, you can orally ask a question, and the podcast hosts will respond to you. This was game-changing for him, for a kid who struggles with reading. I can't say enough about Notebook LM. Again, we have to be careful with these things, but yeah. And the last thing I want to say is, someone had asked, what are the other perspectives? I think I've provided a lot of them in this presentation, but AI adoption versus, AI resistance. Yes, there is a movement. It's called AI resistance. The person I hear the loudest in this community is named Melanie Dussault, and you can follow her on LinkedIn. Her hashtag is AI resistance. She is very, very fixated on kind of saying to faculty, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. That's not the perspective I choose to take, but I want everybody to know all the available choices. Thank you so much. I've got a slide with resources. And again, I'm happy to answer questions, or you can connect with me on socials or email. Yeah.
No, this has been great. Thank you so much for crafting this, putting this together, responding to, I know, the thoughts and ideas that we've been kind of discussing the last few days. And I know we'll make sure we get your slides so that I can dive into those links. I know a lot of them are eager to get into that, so we'll get that going. So let's do this. I want to open up our breakout rooms. I want to give you guys some time to process and talk and kind of navigate through that. So I'm going to open them up. We're going to use the same rooms as yesterday in the learning doc. It's the same breakout rooms, just to keep it for simplicity. And we'll go about 15 minutes before we come back and wrap up. However, if you want to stay in this space, and maybe if Kimberly can stay on for just another few minutes, if you have like another question you want to ask her, maybe not for all these people, she can stick around, and then we'll come back and wrap things up here and get you going on with the rest of your day. So I'm going to open up the rooms. That breakout document is in there in the learning doc. It'll be the same room that you were in yesterday, unless you want to choose to talk with other people, but I want to give you some time to kind of process and talk through that, because I know it's a lot of great information, but you've been consuming a lot. So I want to get you time to kind of work through that. And we'll open those up now and give you some time, and I'll bring you back about 10:05-ish, somewhere around that room. So rooms should be open.
And Aaron, you do have the slides now. Sorry about that. I just forgot to send them.
Nope, you're good. I will link the learning doc in here really quick, and then I will get those links. I'll get that slide deck added to the learning doc here while you guys are in breakout rooms. So let me share the learning doc here one more time. Here's the learning. Here we go. And then I will get the slide deck posted. So give me just 2 minutes, and I will link it up at the top of our learning doc in the resource for session C, where it'll say Kimberly's presentation. So yeah, Craig, go ahead and jump on, and then I'm going to go ahead and get this document or this slide deck going.
Quick question. I'm the instructor for engineering technology, or one of them. And obviously AI going into automation and in the factories and industrial robotics. We're not like just getting started. Where's a good starting point for us to start reading and reviewing what we might want to touch base on with our students? Like just a good beginning books or information to look forward for that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just tell you how I got started, because I have training in natural language processing. So I understand how a language model works from that perspective, but honestly, when the reason I'm fascinated with AI is because now I feel like my mother finally sort of knows what I am doing with my life, because she was like, what's an applied linguist? But Ethan Maurer, and I'm sure that probably Aaron or Stefan mentioned Ethan Maurer. He's a professor I'm going to type his name in the chat so you can see how it's spelled. He's a professor at the Wharton School, which is the business school at Penn State. And he has a book called Co-Intelligence. He's very pro AI, so I'm not saying this is a balanced perspective. He's critical, but he's very pro AI, and he works in teaching in the business school, so he's an entrepreneur. And he has the Wharton School, he and his wife, the Wharton School filmed them doing AI literacy videos on YouTube. So if you just Google that on YouTube, you can find him talking about what is generative AI. It's approachable enough for students. There's some great videos. I mean, if you're just talking generic videos about AI, I think video is a great form for that, because then, you can see the visuals and the graphics. Specifically for engineering, that is way outside my wheelhouse. But I think a starting point is Ethan Mollick, just from a broad spectrum kind of higher ed framework, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it just kind of gives us, again, it was just more of
Yeah.
a, where's the start for us to start introducing these conversations into our students, and where we could go on a, instructional, like, training side of things. So, all right, thank you very much. I appreciate everything. For the last 3 days, it's a little overwhelming, but it was very informative.
Hey, and Craig, I would add too, like start to think about at some point reaching out to like local industry. I've started to do this for I support computer science for K-12, and so I've been trying to reach out to like local businesses or in the computer coding world, and bringing them in, talking about how are they approaching it, what are they doing, what are they finding. And I mean, that's about as real as they can get, because that's hopefully where, in our case, computer science students will hopefully apply for some of these jobs locally. It might be the same kind of thing that maybe we can start to create, and start to create a repository. That's what I'm trying to get, is get these sessions recorded so other people can access, but just to hear like, what is the industry doing? What are they talking about? What are they finding to be things they have to pivot on? And I know that's not going to magically happen here, just, overnight for you to have for your students, but it might be something fascinating to start to find some of that.
Right. And I've already made notes, and I see a couple of my partners in the instructor side. I've made a note for our next advisory board to bring up the topic, and let's get that feedback that you just mentioned and see what they see and what they're looking for on that end. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Kimberly, do you mind if I ask a question? Okay, you're a mute. But where are we at as far as like deeper? Like, I've always waited for like the AI or computer system to like tell me a joke. Like, give me, now tell me a funny story. Now, I've watched them try to do it. How far are we at to the deeper level where you might get into more like creativity as opposed to advanced search versus other things that AIs or, can do? You know what I mean? Like, they don't tell jokes because they can't get a reference, and put it gets hard for them to put it in the context, because that's the whole point. If it was in context, it wouldn't be funny.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I'm going to give you the linguistic answer to this question. I mean, what I call that kind of language use, where you tell a joke, where you get a joke, receptive or productive, we call that pragmatic competence. Okay. And so the ability to understand humor in any language is a very, very, very high level skill. So if you teach any students from ESL, they will not get your jokes until they've been here for 10 plus years. And so we just are not there with the linguistic competence, that because of the context. I think it's because that's not a important kind of output that is going to make those technology companies any money. So they're not motivated. I mean, I think they could. And I think with good prompting, you probably could get it to tell you a joke if you gave it a lot of context and prompted it creatively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna think, yeah, exactly right. Like, I liked how you were breaking up into the different levels. You did a nice job of taking, like, here's where AI is here at this section, and how, but that's what we're really trying to get to is, you can tell me we're moving toward a human conversation, but there's so many things that we do with language that is meta, and it's very deep, right? So and I was like, what the speaker yesterday was talking about, like a 5-year AI window and this exponential growth. And I'm just not sure what that would really mean, other than just kind of basic advertising and I mean, I get that kind of AI, but the kind of deeper level connection that people say they want, or the kind of the psychology people yesterday were talking about, people now just ask the AI questions about their mental health. But I don't know, I mean, how close are we even remotely to that kind of deeper level?
I mean, I hear people talking about reasoning. Well, of course, people first, they say we can't anthropomorphize it. We can't use verbs like reasoning, talking, thinking, joking, that are human verbs. But we don't have other verbs. to describe. So until we have a verb to describe what we're talking about, we have to just use human verbs. I think that's silly to say, to warn against anthropomorphizing it. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday called "She's in Love with ChatGPT." So if you subscribe to the New York Times, or if you can get it through the library, I highly recommend that. There's a podcast called Bot Love or something like that. There's lots of people talking about this idea of like these her ideas. I don't know how close we are. You know, there's been rumblings since December of the next OpenAI model. There's Pi.ai is an emotional support kind of chatbot that is designed to, it has a whole different feel. I don't know a way to describe it, but the way that the company has even marketed it, like you open it up and you just know that it's like a woo-woo space for you to share your emotion. I mean, the colors, the images, everything about it. Aaron's nodding. Yeah, it's.
I tell people it gives me my artificial pat in the back because I can put in any idea and it's like, that is such a fantastic idea.
Yes.
I'm like, huh, yeah, maybe that is. I mean, and I know exactly that it's an algorithm and not, but like it's a whole different feel. It really is.
So and then I'll stop, I swear. What
Yeah.
about the Cartman, or not Cartman, but the South Park? You saw, I'm sure, the GPT where you just outsource your romantic conversations. Because there are these, and I'm going, where is it? Sign me up,
Yeah, well, Pi AI is
Yeah.
You should check it out.
A really funny story real quick. I used to share an upgraded ChatGPT account with my 20-year-old son who's in college. And so he forgot that I can see all his chats. And so this has been a real eye-opener to his life in college. Everything from like, my friends and I are doing shrooms and they're all getting high, but I'm not. Is it because they ate chocolate and I didn't? I mean, hilarious stuff. Why will my ball python snake not eat this mouse? I heated it up to X degrees. I mean, everything from Googling to there's a cute girl. I want to text her, but I don't want to sound like I'm doing overkill. How do I approach her? And so I just texted and I just, in his lingo, I was like, bruh, you got to use Pi for this, which he thought was great. I scored mom points with that. But yeah, I mean, I think they'll get more specialized. And as they get more specialized, we'll probably get AI for joking,
It'll
AI
remind
for
you to
romance.
compliment your partner. It'll remind you to the tone of your email is not, all these things that you do to sabotage personal relationships. And we joke about it now within business, and that you can do. But I mean, I think what's more important, your job or your marriage, right? And 50% of the time we're screwing this up, right?
Really?
So anyway, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'll get off, but thank you.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
just have to, learn how to make the prompts to get that perfect person that you're looking for.
Look, I'm not kidding that the AI should be Match.com. Stop pretending like we can pick our partners. Let the AI, who deep down really knows that you spent 12 hours watching Antiques Roadshow, hook you up with someone else that's already doing it. Anyway.
Yeah.
It might be a new business venture.
Yeah, there you go. I can tell you, my mom's watching Antiques Roadshows.
Well, she's looking for, a friend. I mean, we talk about you get older, you need male friends, female friends, just anybody, is hooking people up and make friendships. But
yeah. Julianne, did you have a question or somebody? I saw somebody else with their hand up. Maybe it wasn't you.
I don't know if she's still in here.
Thank you very much for all the knowledge and information.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, wait, when everybody gets back, I put your slide link into the learning doc and I'll put it here in the chat here as well. So people make sure everybody's got it. Yeah. Thank you for curating all that and putting all that together. I know it's very helpful. I know I was getting lots of messages because they want to see the links and the research. And so I think that's really important stuff that it's exciting that people want to dive into that stuff at a deeper level because it's needed. There's, for everyone that's an evangelist, or doomsayer, where is the real research? What's the stuff happening so we can kind of process through a lot of that. I know it's definitely going to get a lot of use. So it looks like lots of folks are coming back here. As people pop back into the main room, I know we've got about just 10 minutes or so left. And as we wrap up, I have put Kimberly's presentation at the top of the learning doc when we have like the 3 kind of like general agendas for session C, so you can access that. I'm also going to link it here into the chat. And so if you just need to click on that there as well, where you can then dive into all the links and the research that Kimberly has put together. And so so grateful for your time to put that stuff together. And again, I know I mentioned it earlier, but I think it speaks volumes to you as a person, Kimberly, just to take the time the last couple of days to keep tweaking. I know we've been going back and forth, and so reading through their stuff and putting, I know we didn't have time to go through all the slides, but they can go in and dive in and see some of those resources and stuff that kind of caters to the questions we've been kind of grappling with these last few days. So really, really appreciate all that you do. Hopefully a lot of these people will follow your work and get on the Moxie and check out the videos. There's so many good things. I know that's where I go to learn. And I think this is the beauty of this. There's lots of voices, there's lots of people, and I think it's kind of getting a dose of all the elements so that we can make our own decisions. And that's why we're in education, to empower people to learn how to make their own, hopefully, educated decisions about the best avenues to go within life. So as we kind of wrap up here quickly, and then I want to be respectful because I know some of you have tight schedules and lots of meetings and get you wrapped up here by 10:15, but I'll stick around just like we have the last time in case there's still any lingering thoughts. I want to wrap up with this little element here for all of you as we think about bringing our time of AI to a close here. And hopefully this will pop up. And so I leave you with this mindset, this challenge as we move forward with AI and thinking about your work, maybe thinking about our life and everything else that kind of brings into the equation here. Someone that I really value, her work, her name is Anne. She is not in the AI space at all. More philosophy and life and thinking and how do we write and how do we process and see the world. And so she is not an AI voice. But she, in her latest newsletter, came out with this idea called collective curiosity. And I absolutely love this phrase. And the idea here is how do we learn from each other to connect the dots and imagine better ideas? So my challenge to you after our 3 days together is to continue to have collective curiosity around AI, what it means to educate someone else, what it means to be a lifelong learner, what it means for our students to be successful in any of the programs that you guys offer and beyond our time with them. And Anne talks about these things. The idea of collective curiosity allows these 4 things to happen. That we can learn faster, we can journey together and navigate and not have to do this work alone. Reduce some of that confirmation bias, where I think that connects a lot with what Kimberly was talking about, some of those harder to find truths, even as we look into AI and the easy to spot and the hard to spot. How can we collectively help one another kind of ping those out and figure out what that means for us, building this sustainable knowledge and that idea that as people come and go outside of your organization, the work can still continue. So just taking her ideas, continue to ask these questions. What don't we understand yet? What should we go navigate? I know today Kimberly has given us lots of valuable resources that maybe can help us start to move down those paths. And as you look into that research and the links and these other people, it continues to open up new questions and keep diving into those and exploring, and then some of this is going to probably have us question, why are we doing what we're doing? Are there some things that maybe we do need to redesign and reconsider and remix? Maybe there are things we're going, what we're doing is so good. We need to really strengthen this even more. These are the questions that we want to continue to add. We don't have necessarily the answers, but there's the stuff that we need to grapple with to kind of figure out what needs to be remixed, what do we need to hold tight and maybe strengthen even more. Getting into, something as simple as, I think as we talk all this AI and I follow all the updates and I can get caught in the whirlwind staring at my devices all day on the new updates and what they can and can't do. Simple things, right? A wonder walk. Go walk with people, go talk with people, get out of your office. It's the things that bring us the value of being alive and human. And so while we can get so caught up in the AI space, it's these other spaces. And I know it's a simple thing. Sometimes I've had people do this in workshops. They look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, just go walk and talk with somebody, go get a coffee, go do the things that make us remember the power of human connection. And these tiny experiments, continue to tinker, continue to try some things, play with some of those AI research assistant tools to see what is good and what's not. We have to continue to find little moments. I'm not saying give up copious amounts of hours, but find time to keep trying to learn so that we can figure out, ooh, this is something that we need to think about in our practice. This is something that we need to educate our students about. Because if we're not aware of it, it's really, really hard to have these conversations about how to navigate kids of what they should be looking out for, how they should be thinking critically. So it's not like, oh my gosh, I have to go find 10 hours a week. It's where these little tiny places where we can try some stuff, and this learning in public. And maybe this is not necessarily you yet, but I like to leverage this as follow Moxie, get on LinkedIn, look at some of the people that Kimberly has mentioned, follow Stefan and see what his ideas are. Whether you agree or disagree, it's important to read those things, see what's happening. Ethan Malik is posting some incredible stuff. His book is phenomenal. What people are doing now with video generation. And there's just so many things where you don't have to necessarily be the ones that are always doing it all, but seeing what other people are doing to go, what do I think about that? And that's how we collectively keep going through that. And so I leave you with this question here is, which questions will you and your team explore next? Don't let this be the end all be all. These 3 days. I know it's been 6 hours. I appreciate how attentive and interactive all of you have been, especially virtually, which I know can sometimes be more of a challenge. But I hope this is the spark, the catalyst to go, what are we going to do about this? This is what I'm really hoping that this leads us at the end of this time. And so I can't thank you enough. These will be the slides. This stuff's in the learning doc as well. But just know if you have questions or there's things that I can do to provide. I know the learning doc has 342,000 links and more than you'd ever care to click on. But I try to create it in a way where I know people have interest in different categories. And so if there's something there that you want, feel free to reach out. I'm always glad to help or at least have a dialogue or a conversation because this is how we all get better. And so I can't thank you enough for your time. I can't thank Kimberly, you for carving out time. And I know Stefan too. I appreciate him putting together the work that he's put together and Jeremy and everybody else. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think Jeremy, I don't know if he's still there. I'm looking at my screen of all the people. I know he was busy with There you are. So I want to swing it back to you because I know you are the man trying to coordinate all this stuff. And I know you're just talking to legislators and all the other fun stuff. So I'll swing it back to you, but really appreciate all of you, all that you do. And we'll go from there. So I'll head over to you,
Aaron,
Jeremy.
I just say thanks. And you see a lot of the chat box doing the same thing. Just really appreciate your time. I don't know that there's right or wrong answers or this direction or that direction. I think how you approach this was great. And it was to spark some conversation, to open our eyes to what's going on out there and to present some new ideas to us. So we just really, really appreciate your time and effort and putting that all together and sharing the resource with us so we can dive into it and look at it later within our own departments and our own divisions as well, and how we can really help do what it is that we need to do as educators. So I really appreciate that. I'll leave the faculty with a couple of things as we get ready to close out our time together. Double, triple look at your syllabus. We've talked about that a couple of times, making sure that your content is there. I saw Megan Hills maybe just smile. We've pushed hard and talked about that and have a responsibility to make sure some of those things are correct. If you have questions or would like some assistance, feel free to reach out to a DC, a dean, or even myself. I'd be happy to walk through some of those things with you. And related to AI, we know that there are several folks who are requiring their students to use it in class, and there are other folks that are encouraging their students not to use it in class. And so what I would say is make sure you're very clear in your syllabus on what your expectations are around AI for your students as they're going through your class, because they're going to be in a class where they're required to use it and in a class where maybe you're not allowing them to use it, and just being upfront with them and making sure that you're helping them navigate what's okay and what's not okay as their learning progresses through your class. Thanks for everybody for attending. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Happy long weekend. And boy, I can't wait for Tuesday. It's where we really get going and do what we do best. And thanks for all that you're doing in the classroom. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend. We'll stay on for a little while if anybody has any additional questions or comments.